You got Jody McDonald, John McMullen, and Brandon Lee Gowton here with us on Bleeding Green Nation. Good to see BLG. Thank you very much for jumping in. And I always appreciate your powers of observation. Read your post on Bleeding Green Nation this morning. You were there. John was there. I was not. Nolan Smith, bigger than you thought?
I wouldn't say that for me because I didn't think he was small, but I think most people, I guess, expected him to be smaller than he was. And obviously, I was a big proponent of the Eagles drafting Nolan Smith at 10. And certainly that they were able to get him, obviously, at 30 was a big boon to me. And I think really a great move for the team. I think everything we heard about him in terms of, bringing the energy and the passion, I think that was apparent on day one.
Yeah, he had to work even over 45 minutes because none of the edge rushers were there at BLG. And they did this. Have you ever seen that in 7-on-7s? It was sort of 7-on-9.
Yeah.
Where they had the two edge rushers out there. Janarius Robinson, by the way, too. I mean, he looks like an edge rusher. I don't know if he can play, but if Hollywood was looking to cast an edge rusher, they might go after Janarius Robinson. He is so big and so impressive. But Nolan, man, basically they were out there to fake rush and then stop and then chase the play. So he's running like 30 yards downfield, 20 yards downfield. He was really working hard. I think the Eagles fans are going to love his energy. But I've never seen that before. 7-on-9. We always see 9-on-7. We saw 7-on-9.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a little different, and certainly too, obviously can do things like run into the tight end, kind of try to disrupt their routes and different things like that as well. So I guess I don't know if that's a Sean Desai thing. I don't know if it's I don't think it's Nolan Smith's decision, but almost in my mind, I feel like if it was up to him, he would be out there because I do think he wants to get those extra reps and find any kind of way onto the field that he can. But yeah, I really think that the Eagles got a good one in him.
The two big guys from Georgia you didn't get a chance to see yesterday because, as John pointed out, it's edge guys only on the 7-on-9 passing drills. But you got a chance to see both of the guys on the field, and I know you got a chance to talk to Jordan Davis afterwards. How much are these guys going to grow together on that defensive line? We'll see what the pairings are when they get them going, and we know the defensive tackle is a situational substitution position. Do you think they're going to throw those two big dogs together much during this first season?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to rotate really all those defensive tackles. That's typically what they've done here. The leaders at that position are usually, I think, like you're talking about like 67, like 70-ish% of the snaps. You don't really have every down kind of players at those spots. And really, they need them to step up because you lose Javon Hargrave. That's a big deal. And to count on, just Jalen Carter as a rookie to replace all of that production, that's, a tall task. But you need your 2022 first-round pick that you traded up for, mind you, to really step up as well. And I think Jordan Davis did show some potential, especially more so earlier on last season prior to that injury in the Steelers game. And it was kind of interesting that prior to that point, before that injury, he hadn't really been on the field so much as a pass rusher on those downs as much as he was more used in those 5-man fronts exclusively, basically. And they finally started to change that right before he got hurt. But then he gets hurt, and then they signed Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh, so we didn't really get to see Jordan Davis in that role afterwards, at least as much as you would maybe have hoped to see him. So it's a big offseason for him, and he has to step up.
There was a bit of deference from Nick Sirianni, specifically in the backfield, where Boston Scott and Kenny Gainwell sort of got the first reps ahead of DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny. I certainly don't expect that to continue deep into training camp. However, other guys like Nicholas Morrow at linebacker, there was no deference. What does that tell you about the backup linebackers?
Yeah, I mean, there's just less guys there, I guess, as opposed to, you have Kenny Gainwell and Boston Scott who have been here for the entirety, I guess, of the Nick Sirianni era. So, and then they're obviously just going to rotate at that position way more heavily at running back than they are, let's say, at linebacker, where last year they basically only played 2 guys the whole season in TJ Edwards and Kaiser White. And yeah, I don't think they have the guys really to get on the field outside of Nakobe Dean and Morrow. Although Christian Ellis had that pick.
Yeah, man.
I think
that was a nice play. That was the
really
play
nice
of the
play.
day. Yeah.
He brought the juice. I felt like last year, limited playing time, but on special teams, garbage time when he's playing on defense. I feel like, maybe he pushes for some kind of defensive snaps, or at least as, another key special teams player this year. I'm really interested to see if he can do anything.
Since you went to special teams, I will ask you to grade out the competition in punting yesterday between Aaron Sipas. John had a specific grade and way to describe it. I'm looking forward to yours. How would you compare the 2 punters yesterday, BLG?
I think it's clear Aaron Sipas, has punted in the NFL before. I think it's a tall task, to use that term again, to have a UDFA come in here and just naturally expect that he can definitely beat out an established veteran, especially and outshine him from the jump. I just don't think that's realistic. We'll see if that tightens up, in the training camp practices and the actual games. But so far, unfortunately, I feel like for the Eagles, Sipas is in the lead.
Yeah, I compared it to a pro wrestling squash match. It's only one day, but that's what it was yesterday. I was surprised. Like, Aaron's a big dude, man, and normally punters are like that. They got those big lower bodies and obviously powerful. I was surprised how skinny Ty Zettner was in the lower body compared to Aaron Sipas. But yeah, I mean that was so lopsided on one day. Maybe he just had the best day of his life and Zettner had the worst day of his life. If not, Ty Zettner's in trouble. That's my perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a spot where they shouldn't be done. And looking like throughout the summer, you bring
it could be somebody else. Yeah,
right. It's worth having Zettner around for at least the illusion of competition and pushing Sipas, and maybe that brings out the best in him. Ultimately, pushing him like that, having a reminder that there's someone competing for his job. But at the end of the day, they shouldn't be stopping from looking just because Sipas beats out Zettner.
Both of you guys have mentioned the interception by Ellis yesterday of Marcus Mariota. We have a new backup quarterback on the team this year. Gardner Minshew and his van has rolled out of town. And the guy who was much desired here several years ago to possibly be the future quarterback of the Eagles is now, I think, a slight upgrade, but an upgrade at backup quarterback. Now everyone hopes Marcus has a great year sitting on the bench and holding a clipboard and doesn't need to play. But if he does, do you think the Eagles are better at the backup quarterback position this year, BLG?
I think they're different at the backup quarterback position, more so than, significantly better. Mariota, you look at the numbers, you look at where he's at this point in his career, don't think he's a guy who's pushing the ball down the field a ton, as much as he likes to throw more underneath. And obviously, I think the mobility is big. He had his best rushing season last year, and I think that certainly adds value in the context that, okay, your backup quarterback has to start a game. We don't have to necessarily ask him to throw the ball 30 times. Maybe we can kind of be in those low 20s if we do a lot of stuff with him, designed runs or just counting on him to make plays with his legs. So I definitely think there's value in that. But I also think, he got benched ultimately for Desmond Ridder, not just because the season went awry, although that was part of it, but because, and then again, it's not like he was this super hot commodity this offseason. So there's a reason for
that. Back to the defensive side of the ball, 2 interesting tweaks to me. One I've been advocating for a while, and that's Zach McPherson in the slots. The Eagles now have some bodies at outside corner behind Darius Slay and James Bradbury. Josh Jobe got some first-team reps, even Greedy Williams. Calais Ringo's, obviously, they have high hopes for him. I think it makes him better. Avante is still working his way back from surgery, so he couldn't take first-team reps, and Zach McPherson was taking them. Boy, I think that's a positive. What about you, BLG?
Yeah, absolutely. We saw the value of a backup slot cornerback. I feel like last year when Maddox went down multiple times throughout the season, and teams were not shy to go right after Josiah Scott. Like that seemed to be just the game plan. Just whoever Josiah Scott is guarding, go. We're going to throw to that guy, and it worked out well for the most part for other teams there. So I definitely think that's a spot where they have to increase competition. Maddox has had some injury issues, availability issues in the past, so you have to prepare that you're not going to have him the entire season, especially the nature of his position, kind of being in the traffic there, especially as a smaller guy like he is. So to have McPherson there, and look, Zach McPherson is kind of quietly biding his time where he's at. It looked like at one point last offseason that he might be the starting cornerback opposite of Darius Slay. That was before they were able to have James Bradbury fall into their lap. So he's kind of been, waiting for his moment to actually finally play on defense. Didn't really get it last year when the Eagles were so healthy at cornerback on the outside. So this gives him another path to playing time.
A couple of veteran guys not there yesterday. We can all understand that. The Eagles did that all the way back to Doug for sure. There were veteran days off. Nothing like getting your second day of the year off. That's pretty damn good. But with 80 some odd guys in camp, it isn't that big a deal. We expect this to continue all throughout camp, right? The Eagles going the less is more route, and that's specifically for those who can get by without practice. The veterans are going to benefit from this, right, BLG?
I think so. I mean, we can sit here and look back at last year when, some of these conversations were happening. Oh no, they're, light practice schedule. But I mean, now they've proven that it can work for them. Certainly did last year. So yeah, I definitely think, I mean, the way I look at it is like, what's one of the worst things that could possibly happen at this time of year? And it would be that God forbid, have some kind of catastrophic injury in OTAs.
Yeah.
As opposed to the other downside by being light, I guess, is like, okay, maybe they're a little bit rusty or whatever you want to say there. But, they're also 2-0 in week 1 under Nick Sirianni. So that really hasn't been the biggest issue so far.
True. I mean, it's tough not to give them the benefit of the doubt at this point when it comes to stuff like that, BLG. Wide receiver, I think, is an interesting point for the fans, specifically that third spot. I get the feeling that they want to piecemeal it this year more than last year. Last year was sort of like, all right, we're going to throw it. It's Quez. If we're going to run it, it's Zach. And occasionally you throw the curveball with Zach Pascal, who could at least catch the football. This year, they got more of a natural slot player in Olamide Zaccheaus. That, to me, will enable Quez to play outside more, which is probably better for him. Also, Dan Arnold. That's a guy people are sleeping on.
Yep.
He is so much, again, one day, but he's better than as a receiver than Grant Calcaterra. Obviously, Jack Stoll. Now, Jack's going to be here because Jalen Hurts loves him. He's a great blocker. That's his role. But is Dan Arnold going to be on this team? Because I think he's got a real chance if they want to sort of piecemeal it and go with different looks. He might be the replacement for Zach Pascal in that, run receiving look.
Yeah, I think that's a fair observation. I mean, he made a really good catch, I thought, in practice yesterday, contested leaping catch that drew praise from his teammates at his position. So certainly flashed early on. And I kind of think back to him when the Eagles played against him in 2020. I believe that was Jalen Hurts' second start there against the Cardinals. I remember he had some big plays against the Eagles defense. Now, obviously, that wasn't the best team, but still, he has flashed at times in the NFL. I think there could be something there. We'll see how health and everything shakes out the tight end position. But to get back to the wide receiver 3 battle, quote unquote, yeah, I don't think it's, as simple as, it's either going to be Quez or Olamide, as much as it's kind of just a question of what's the timeshare between those two guys and what's the snap count look like. And I think that has the chance to fluctuate with, how everyone's performing, what the game plan is, because those are two different players. I think Quez is
Yeah.
more of a stretch the field guy, where, as you pointed out, Olamide is more traditional, classic slot receiver, kind of catch a pass over the middle of the field, make some guys miss, and make things happen that way. I guess it'll be kind of interesting to see the evolution of Jalen Hurts' game, in the sense that I don't think he's like the biggest check down quarterback. But there were times last year, and I think about the 49ers championship game specifically, where the situation kind of called for that more, and just taking what's there and kind of relying on your skilled players to make some plays after they make the catch. So I think that's a kind of a new element that they could potentially have in the offense this year with Olamide.
All right, back to tight ends. Got its number one, stole number two for blocking purposes, whatever, 3. So the battle is on for TE3. Arnold made a big play yesterday. Certainly Calcaterra as a draft pick is a guy they're going to give chances to. How about that Tyree Jackson? Back out there on the field yesterday. Maybe the biggest tease in Philadelphia over the past 2 years. A guy who looks good, makes a play in preseason. You get excited. Oh, guess what? He's injured again. And he's done for the season. Out there again yesterday, did he grab your eye at all, Brandon Lee Gowton?
Other than just being out there for the first time, since the 2021 season, really, because he didn't do much. He wasn't really, or no, he did play last year a little bit, but he wasn't much of a factor, and certainly not in the off season. It wasn't until the regular season that he finally got healthy and played on special teams and a very few offensive snaps. So, look, this is a make or break summer for him. This is probably his last chance here after missing a lot of last offseason. So it's his second true full offseason going from quarterback to tight end. So he's really going to have to show something. And number two, as you mentioned, he has to stay healthy, because he's had a lot of different injuries here. And I almost wonder, if he's too big. I don't know if that makes any sense, but watching him play on special teams, it almost, and I say that as someone who's taller than him, but I almost wonder if he's too big and prone to injury, or just I don't know, not compact enough. I don't know if that's a real thing, but I kind of wonder about that.
Yeah, but he's the offensive Janarius Robinson. He's the guy, no matter how many times I see him, I go, whoa.
Looks like a player.
Yeah. And same thing with Janarius. But yeah, I don't know. I don't see a path to a roster spot for Tyree anymore, especially now with Arnold here, because I just don't see the consistency from practice to practice. But he is impressive physically, no doubt about that. So he'll probably get a chance when he ultimately leaves here somewhere else. I mean, that's how impressive he is. But you mentioned Jalen Hurts. It's funny because I was just texting Ed, my buddy Ed Kratz, about, what are we going to do today? And, he's writing Jalen Hurts, and I'm like, Jalen bores me now. He's too good. I'm like, what can I do with that, Brad? It's amazing how this has gone about. People love to criticize me all the time because, I would say I don't see Jalen Hurts ever being a superstar in this league. I was wrong.
Sure.
He is unbelievable. And it's become somewhat boring. Am I overstating that?
No, I mean, that's kind of like a good place to be in for a player in training camp. I think certain players graduate to that level. We've seen that over time, where once upon a time when Fletcher Cox was first year, second year, pretty interesting to watch him in training camp. Guys like that, or LaShawn McCoy once upon a time, or Zach Ertz once upon a time, Jason Kelsey, whoever you want to say. Certainly you keep an eye on those guys at one point, and then at some point you're like, oh, they're just good. So there's really no even point about including okay, Zach Ertz makes a great catch. Okay, I'm not really going to put that in my notes or tweet it because everyone's expecting that. It's not even interesting anymore. So I definitely think it's a good place for Jalen Hurts to be in that spot. Of course, if he starts struggling, which I don't anticipate, and through training camp or whatever, that'll certainly be noted. But as long as he's looking good, which I thought he mostly was on the first day of OTA, especially first pass right away, strong start. Completion over the middle to Quez Watkins. It's a good place to be.
And he's the unquestioned leader of this team, which we've known since they drafted him, that he was a guy who was going to be, if given the chance, a take charge kind of guy, and he certainly is that right here, right now. How necessary is that with a new offensive coordinator? Now, those two are tied at the hip, known each other forever, but it's a major change when you have a guy like Shane Steichen leaving the organization. How much is Brian Johnson's life made easier by Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, I think there's definitely, an open dialogue there. I saw them chatting on the sideline during practice yesterday. I guess when the twos were up. And, I think there's a lot of value in that. I also think that it's an interesting spot because you were so successful on offense last year. You obviously don't want to reinvent the wheel and change everything just because it's a new guy. But certainly, you have to account for defenses adjusting to you and whatnot. So there's going to have to be some tweaks, and you have some new really just Alameda. You have some new faces though, so you have to account for that as well. But yeah, I definitely think that relationship is a good thing to have, and it's a little more concerning. Not to make it about Carson Wentz, but like when you have a Carson Wentz situation where maybe Jalen Hurts or the quarterback can't take that criticism, and I know Hurts can. And it seems like Brian Johnson can push him while at the same time still maintaining a good relationship and making sure that both sides are doing their best to succeed.
Want to pick your brain on the podium theory, BLG. How much stock do you put into when the Eagles bring up a Nicholas Morrow or a Reed Blankenship or a Terrell Edmonds and single those players out? How much stock do you put into, hey, the Eagles must think pretty highly of so-and-so?
Yeah, it's not nothing. This is like an active, conscious decision. It's not just by accident. I think there's some, the player has to be involved at least a little bit. I feel like, but also, you're acquiescing to the media request as well at some level. But yeah, I definitely think there's something to be said for that. And, it makes sense in the sense that Morrow is really the only established linebacker on the team. I think you can say, Nakobe Dean has potential and there's hope for him, but he has not proven it at the NFL level yet, whereas Morrow has. And then Reed Blankenship, he has not quite fully proven it, but he did show potential last season. And at least relative to Sidney Brown, who's a rookie and coming in here new, he's experienced and it's a new defensive system, so you can't really say like, oh, he has this big leg up necessarily in the scheme. But he's been here before, as opposed to Terrell Edmonds, who's a new face. So yeah, definitely think there's value in that.
BLG, I know you're not going to learn much in these limited practices that the Eagles are having. We still got to figure out who's going to be the right guard on this team. They have I think, an underrated player to replace. And I'm glad that Jason Kelsey agrees with me on that one because everybody knows it's the guy standing next to him. Is it going to be a competition? Do you think the Eagles have a lean to begin with? Is it something that could change? Or if they make the call, will they stay committed to it throughout the entire year?
If I had to place a wager, speculate on which player plays the most right guard snaps this season, I think I would take, not Cam Jurgens. I think I'd take the field over Cam Jurgens. And that's not because I think Cam Jurgens is necessarily going to be it's not because I'm down on him as a player. I don't think anyone is. I just don't know about him playing guard. That's a totally new position for him. Has no experience there other than maybe some practice reps. Was obviously taking the reps there in OTAs. But this idea that like you can't just have him on the bench because he was the 51st overall pick last year. I mean, Tyler Steen was the 66th overall pick this year. So like, or 65th, whatever he was.
Yeah.
So like, is that really a big difference? Like, I don't think it is. And I think that I know Steen doesn't have that experience so much at guard either, especially right guard. But I definitely think he's more of the body type that the Eagles are looking for. And, Joe Santaloquito did an article for us last week at Bleeding Green Nation, kind of talking to Brian Baldinger. And Baldy was talking about how, like he's close with Lane, and in theory, I think Lane kind of wants to play with a bigger guy at right guard. He's kind of had that for a lot of his career, especially in the days of Brandon Brooks. And I think that's something that the Eagles have liked under Jeff Stoutland as a whole. These kind of tackle-sized guards, I would say. And you look at Cam Jurgens, and you can't envision him playing tackle. He certainly, and he doesn't have to. But like, I just think it's a totally different body type. I just think Steen is a legitimate contender for that spot.
Yeah, and you look at the other side, Brandon. I mean, a lot of the reason why the Eagles have wanted those bigger bodies at guard is to protect the undersized Jason Kelsey. So now you have undersized,
Yep.
Which could be an issue, especially against those big, powerful inside interior
Dexter
players
Lawrence,
who can,
yeah.
Dexter Lawrence type, Linval Joseph back. Kelsey would always tell me how strong Linval was when he was back on the Giants. Really gave him headaches. That type of player could really be an issue with those two guys in the middle. So I do think it's something to keep an eye on. And I definitely think long term, Tyler Steen's going to be, that's the plan. He's going to be the right guard. The question is, how quickly do you get there? I guess I'll end it with one interesting tweak, and it could be good, it could be bad. Make sure you follow Brandon on Twitter at Brandon Gowton, Bleeding Green Nation. Tremendous podcast. He's great on our show. He's great everywhere. Make sure you follow Brandon. It's under the radar, but Kyron Johnson. So he was playing off-ball linebacker yesterday. When you change positions, because he had been an edge rusher, it could be good. Could be they're trying to find a place for him, maybe because he's a good special teams player, or it could be bad. It could be the last resort. Like, this guy can't play here. We're going to try him here, and he's going to get cut. Your feel, I know it's tough at this point, but your feel on that move, because I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. You can really talk yourself into either way, depending on how you feel about it. I think that we talked about earlier, they're light at linebacker. They do not have a lot of bodies there, so why not, put something more on Kyron Johnson's plate here and see if that's something he can take on as well and give them more depth at that position, or maybe they feel confident that he can kind of be a go-between and play at either. I think there obviously has to be some willingness from the player as well, and I think to see that buy-in is good, and that certainly increases his chances of sticking around, finding a path to having value on this roster. But yeah, I think it's a matter of him again trying to find his way onto this team any way he can, and trying to carve out a role.
BLG, last one for me, and as always, thank you for jumping in. Two new coordinators yesterday, and we'll get a look at how the teams play once the season gets underway. Specifically, play calling with Brian Johnson should be very interesting. But there's also how they handle practices. Some guys are hands-on and screamers and yellers, and other guys are stand back and specifically talk to their position. Could I get this guy up to speed? Let someone else handle it. Any differences between the two no coordinators yesterday and the first practice you got a chance to see, and Steichen and Gannon from last year?
That's it. One difference that I noticed was that I don't think I really noticed Shane Steichen on the sideline before. I mentioned that earlier. Jalen Hurts was talking to Brian Johnson like that. I feel like Shane was always kind of back by Sirianni, like behind the quarterbacks there, kind of like, I guess, like 15, 20 yards or so behind the offensive or the line of scrimmage. So I don't know if that's any different at all. And Johnson wants kind of like a different view of his offense, if that's a better perspective for him, or if that's just happened to be where he was, or if he was trying to talk to some of the players on the sideline where they're lining up more so. That could be something. I don't know. We'll continue to monitor that with the final OTA practice and training camp. Desai, I honestly didn't even notice him a ton. I can't say on day one, at least. I think Jim Schwartz, I always remember where he was when he was coaching the team, especially in those 7-on-7s. He liked to, line up right, basically as the center almost, and, look back at his defense and see how they were lining up from that perspective. Gannon, I felt like kind of stood in different areas and, could be more of an energy guy at times. kind of hyping guys up. He obviously came from a background where he coached the secondary, so maybe that was kind of more of an inclination for him. But yeah, I think that those kind of things are going to be interesting to see. And I guess ultimately too, when the games start, are these guys calling the game from the booth? Are they going to be down on the field? We'll see on those things.
Different guys handle it differently. That's why I needed your take. We love all your takes, BLG. Thank you very much. Please check out his website, Bleeding Green Nation. I do every single day. Thank you much for jumping in with us on this morning.
Thanks, guys.
Brennan Lee Gowton, Bleeding Green Nation, here with us on Birds 365. All right, Johnny Mac, Jody Mac, coming back. Got a specific question about John. Looking forward. The Eagles are going to work out today and then next week, and then before you know it, since they're not going to have a mandatory mini camp, we'll be at camp. And then there's a couple of camp things I want to get into with John when we come back. And oh, by the way, coming up about 25 minutes from now, Mike Quick would hop aboard with us today. I thought that'd be a good guy to get with the whole third wide receiver question and the DeAndre Hopkins question. Why not talk to one of the greatest receivers in the history of the Philadelphia Eagles and the, of course, color analyst on the Eagles Broadcast Radio Network. So Mike Quick coming up in about 20. Mac and Mac coming back in just a couple.